Hey kids, Flexing Teacher Weber here. Why do I call myself Flexing Teacher? Well, I always tend to, when I meet people, I flex for them. And I hope they get that it's sort of an ironic joke, because if you've ever seen my arms, they are quite spindly, and I'm definitely not a muscle man. So that's why I call myself Flexing Teacher Weber. It's a joke that hopefully people get. I hope people don't think I'm some muscle man. I'm going to be doing math videos throughout the year. The purpose of these videos is sort of to review some of the work we've done throughout the week. And if you've been having some trouble, to hopefully pick up on some of the topics we've been learning in class. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do a couple videos related to converting from fractions to decimals and percents. Now, it's actually a review of the notes and examples I've already done with the kids in class, so a lot of this stuff should be familiar. But what happens a lot of the time is if you forget it in class or weren't there, it's nice to have sort of a video review of the steps involved. So that's sort of the purpose of these videos. So what I'm going to do first is start off with a couple of grade 7 examples. The purpose is to convert a fraction into a decimal, and the way you do that, ideally, is to try to convert to a fraction out of 10, 100, or 1,000, or some magnitude of 10, 100, or 1,000. Could be 10,000, 100,000, a million, etc. So we want to use equivalent fractions to do this. So I'm going to focus in on question number 1. And what I'm going to do is take that fraction 1 over 20. Oh, I want blue. There we go. I'll take the fraction 1 over 20. And I'm going to convert that to a fraction out of 10, 100, or 1,000. Now I think it's easiest to convert this to a fraction out of 100. And I'm going to do that by timesing by 5. And if I multiply the denominator by 5, I need to multiply the numerator by 5. And that gives me 5 out of 100. Now, once I have the fraction out of 100, that is happy times, because the 2 zeros on 100 tell me how many decimal places I will need. I will need 2 decimal places. Now, since it's 5 out of 100, I'm going to put that 5 in the hundredths spot. This spot right here is the tenths. This place value is the hundredths. So I'm going to place in 5 in the hundredth spot, and I'm going to have a 0 placeholder in the tenth spot and a 0 placeholder in the 1 spot. And that decimal is 5 hundredths. So that's an example of how we convert a fraction into a decimal using equivalent fractions. I'm going to do another one like that. So there's another example here. 21 over 25. And what I recognize right away is that I can convert this to a fraction out of 100. And I can do that by multiplying by 4. And if I multiply the denominator by 4, I have to multiply the numerator by 4. And that gives me 84 over 100. And then once I have it out of 100, it's happy times, because 2 zeros on 100 tell me the number of decimal spots, 1, 2. And in those spots, go 8 and 4, 0 placeholder in the 1 spot, and there's my decimal, 0 and 84 hundredths. So those are 2 grade 7 examples of how you convert a fraction into a decimal. Now, I want to show one other thing that we don't really focus on much in grade 8. Now, another way you can convert a fraction into a decimal is to divide the numerator by the denominator. So I'm going to use the same examples we had at the top. So the first example was 1 over 20. Now, many people don't remember that a fraction means division. This means 1 divided by 20. Now, that's typically something we would do with a calculator or technology, but if you were to do 1 divided by 20, you would get an answer of 0 and 5 hundredths. That's not something we're going to focus on in grade 8. We're going to focus on using mental math strategies like equivalent fractions. But it is important that you understand that idea that a fraction means numerator divided by a denominator, in addition to being a part of a whole and a part of a group. Looking at the other example, again, 21 over 25 would mean 21 divided by 25, and you would also get 0 and 84 hundredths. but that's a pretty challenging division question to complete, and we would usually use technology for that. So the focus of grade 8 is going to be using equivalent fractions out of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000 to convert to our decimals. Okay, that's more of a grade 7 example. Let's do now more of a grade 8 example. I'm going to flip forward. Doink. Oh, and before we do that, the other focus right now is also converting into a percent. So to convert that decimal to a percent, we can use mental math for that. So I'm going to change to blue. There we go. Doink. We'll use the examples we already had. We'll use our first decimal, 0 and 5/100ths. And to mentally convert that to a percent, you mentally multiply by 100. 2 zeros on 100 means shift the decimal 1, 2 spots to the right. And that becomes 5%. And same thing with the other example. The other example was 0 and 84/100ths. And to mentally convert that to a percent, you would mentally multiply by 100. 2 zeros on 100 means shift the decimal 1, 2 spots to the right, and you get 84%. So in addition to changing fractions to decimals, we want to change fractions and decimals to percents. Now let's jump over and do more of a grade 8 kind of question. So I'm going to flip forward, and we're going to look at the fraction 12 over 15. And we're going to start off converting to a decimal. Now, what's tricky here, and what a lot of kids miss, is that they automatically want to go, okay, I'll make a fraction out of 10. That's too hard. Can't do it. Well, you can do it. It's tricky. Fraction out of 100, super tricky. 1,000, I don't know. So, what we always need to make sure is the fraction in lowest terms. And what I see right away here is that I know 3 times 4 is 12 and 3 times 5 is 15. So there's a factor that will divide into both the numerator and denominator, and that's 3. So if I divide 12 by 3, I get 4, and 15 divide by 3, and I get 5. Now I can convert to a fraction out of 10, 100, or 1,000. This one very easily converts out of 10 by timesing by 2, timesing by 2, and I get 8 out of 10. Once I have it out of 10, 1 0 on the 10 tells me that there is 1 decimal spot, and in that decimal spot goes an 8 with a 0 placeholder in the 1s spot, and we say that that is 8/10. To make that decimal into a percent, take your decimal and mentally multiply by 100. 2 zeros on 100, shift the decimal 1, 2, put a 0 placeholder in that spot, and you get 80%. So the tricky thing about this question is making sure that you reduce the fraction to lowest terms first. Let's do one more like that, and then I'll have more questions in a second video. So I'm going to flip forward. Doink. And we'll do another question similar to that. We're going to take the fraction 7 over 35. Now, if I want to convert that to a decimal, I immediately see that this is tricky to make a fraction out of 10, 100, or 1,000. So what I want to check first is the fraction in lowest terms. And hopefully I know that 7 times 5 is 35. So the greatest common factor of 7 and 35 is 7. If I divide the numerator and denominator by 7, I get the fraction 1/5. fifth. And now I have a fraction I can work with. And this is very similar to the last question now. Make it a fraction of 10 by timesing by 2, times the top by 2, and you get 2/10. 1 0 on 10 tells me 1 decimal spot, and in that spot I will put a 2. 0 placeholder in the 1 spot. For the percent, 0 and 2/10 mentally multiply by 100, shift the decimal 2 spots, 0 in the open spot, and that's going to be 20%.